Have you ever noticed how when you find a special person and you find a special gift, how excited you become to give something? It's on, it just needs to be turned on. What do you think that is? What do you think that real excitement, that enthusiasm is? I think it's God. I think it's God coming out of you. I think it's God that is us expressing itself. We sure get excited. On the other side of it, when we receive, do we receive with the same type of enthusiasm, knowing that there's a person who cares, that there's something special they want to do for us? I've recently been in a position to do a lot of receiving, and this is what brought this up. So I'm very conscious of how I receive. There's a certain person that I've read, and I couldn't find the quote, but he even talks about receiving food, and when we say grace, that we show our gratitude for the farmers and the sun and the water and the seeds and what it took to put this food in front of us. But not only thanking for that, but preparing ourselves to receive the nutrition. He talked about we eat now in front of our televisions and our computers and in our cars and in fast food restaurants, and we don't take enough time sometimes to really receive the nutrition. So I think that we all can look at how we receive. The quote from as you see on the cover of the bulletin, as you give, so shall you receive. And if you Google it, I mean, what do we ever do without Google? And if you Google it, you'll come up with about 10 interpretations. And the first one, like from the King James Bible, it says, you know, as you give, if you give money, money will come back to you. And if you give love, love will come back to you. What I'd like to do is look at that quote in a little bit different form. As you give, so shall you receive. And look at the word as. And what I think it can have another interpretation of being how you are, or in kind of unity terms, how you be when you receive is as important as how you give. Okay? Deepak Chopra, in his second law of success, I always quote him, is the law of giving. And within the first sentence, or the first paragraph, he redefines it as a law of giving and receiving. Because he's talking about the interaction, the energy exchange between two humans or two beings. Could be a pet, could be anything. But how important it is, if you don't have the receiving, the sending is no good. How good would Joe Montana been without Jerry Bruss? And there's giving and receiving, a little bit different way of looking at it. But so important to complete that. And I know that I had to look at my ability to receive with gratitude and love. Now we're going to go on to the more on the side of giving. There's another fellow that I truly like to quote, which is right here, Ken Dykewald, who studied us baby boomers for 40 years, but I quoted it the last time I was here, with purpose, going from success to significance in work and life. And he interviewed and studied people, mainly in retirement, who were very much giving of their time, their money, and their attention to certain charitable organizations. And he asked them, why? What are the reasons? Why do you do this? And the first reason that they gave, I don't want to miss this, is to do the right thing. Now there's a pretty innocuous term. Yet I see people shaking their heads because doing the right thing isn't probably as logical as it is. It comes from the heart. And we know what the right thing is. And we know that to help people is an important aspect. So that's the number one thing that people bring up, is to do the right thing. The next, second one, make a difference. You know, when I spoke before, I had a quote on the bulletin that said, sympathy sees and says, I'm sorry. Compassion sees and says, I'll help. When we learn the difference, we can make a difference. And that's very important, to make a difference. I remember I spoke right after the San Bruno fire, and I was very moved by the fire. And I decided right then I'm going to make a difference. So I called, and I called, and I called to the blood bank. And all you got was a busy signal. And of course, I'm a little frustrated with it. But at the same time, a few hours later, I saw on television that there were so many people who showed up to give blood. There was a 3-hour wait, and they had enough people there to take them through the whole night. But these were people who were making a difference. I did learn from the experience, and I started giving blood after that, and I've given blood ever since. And I think that if anyone wants to do something to make a difference, giving blood can be a really wonderful thing, because it will make a difference to whoever receives it. The third one is to give thanks. Now, most of us have probably grown up and lived in the United States, which, gosh, we have wonderful lives here. Things aren't very easy for us, for a lot of things. Some things aren't so easy. But to give thanks, just to give back. And hopefully, when we do that, we will give back, and it will be received with love. There was one other one that I found really interesting, and that was way down on the list, like 8th, was tax deductions. And you think so many times, we're going to do this, we're going to get the tax deduction, but when you really question people, they aren't really concerned with what it does for them. We just want to do something and be received. You know, on April 29th, Unity Spiritual Center of San Francisco tithed 10% of our offering to the Family Album Project, which is a group of, and actually for the portraits that would be taken at the Ronald McDonald House at Stanford Children's Hospital. And Kathy Russell, who isn't here today, but she introduced us to Virginia and Albert Becker, who do this, and we're doing it out of their own pocket, and we have now supported them in covering the cost, because what happens there is the kids and their families and their moms and dads and grandpas and grandmas, and but they're there for a very specific reason. If you're at Children's Hospital at Stanford, you're probably being very challenged health-wise. So what happens is they come in, and myself and a friend of mine go down early, and we set up the studio. It's a portable studio, and then it starts at 4 o'clock and sometimes goes to 8 o'clock at night, where the kids come there with their parents and have their portrait taken and are given to them immediately. So we're helping cover the cost of the ink and the paper. But I want to just describe what it is to be there. I've been fortunate enough to spend a few minutes there. Generally, I set up and then we leave because there's a lot of people. But you see these little children, and not little, some of them are teenagers, but a lot of them, they show up and they have scars. on their heads where they've had brain surgery, and they show up with tubes in their nose, and they show up with breathing apparatus, and they're in wheelchairs, not crutches. And for about 10 minutes, they get to be the star. They're the center stage. Virginia, she puts them in Superman outfits and get the fan going and the cape's flying back, and she puts them flying over the San Francisco Golden Gate Bridge. But for a few minutes, they get to be the star of the show for something other than their health challenges. And I see there Virginia and Albert and several others and Kathy, but for a few minutes, they're seen as whole and wonderful and complete, just the way they are. So, we ran a little long today, so I'm going to end now. But I'm going to misquote one of the great givers of the world. I'd probably be struck down. But one of the great givers of the world, Mother Teresa. And she said, you know, call it charity, call it love, call it caring, call it whatever you want. It's all